over a cold, pardon me. Beloved community is a cherished ideal, and Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream for a world more diverse, peaceful, and just. Beloved community may be the closest thing Unitarian Universalists can come to a concept of heaven. Not a magical place entered when we die, but what we create here and now together with intention. Beloved community is not a destination, but a way of being, a world we build and rebuild with our actions, our words, and our relationships to one another. As the reading by Parker Palmer illustrates, creating beloved community is not easy, and it doesn't happen all at once. There are profound and deeply rooted fears that prevent us from coming face to face with difference in a meaningful way. Bringing about the beloved community means examining those fears and moving beyond them. It means connecting with others who are also holding their own fears. It means talking about what we care most about across our differences so we can cultivate what is life-giving for all of us. In June, we held a service, The Promise and the Practice, designed by members of Black Lives of UU, in which each person present was invited to write down their hopes and their fears in regards to racial equity. There were many hopes and fears expressed, but some of those in that ritual were the hope for greater understanding, a way forward together for dignity, respect, and the inherent worth of every person of color so long denied. Another named the hope that as a nation we can make small connections which will lead to greater understanding of each other, a humanity of compassion and connection. Your expressed fears included fear of being ridiculed, fear of hurting someone, fear of not contributing to a racism-free world, fear of closing your heart to others, fear that we are stalled by apathy and contentment. We carry our hopes and our fears with us wherever we go, often unexpressed and unexamined, yet motivating so much of our behaviors. Looking at our hopes and fears in diverse covenantal relationship is scary but crucial to building the beloved community. Beloved Conversations is a curriculum developed by Dr. Mark Hicks of Meadville, Lombard with the Fahs Collaborative to foster conversations around race and ethnicity. The goal of Beloved Conversations is to help create beloved community by honestly and covenantally addressing the wounds of racism that harm everyone, making it possible to work together to redress them. These conversations take courage, and they begin with a look at the history of our nation, our state, our neighborhoods, and our families. Through this process, participants explore together our individual place in the system of racism, not to dwell there in sorrow or shame, but to better understand our own privilege, power, and harm in the pervasive white supremacy that we all live within and among. We're about to hear from 3 participants of Beloved Conversations, though each person, some almost 30 people in all, has their own story to tell. As we hear from these folks, I invite you to consider whether participating in Beloved Conversations may be a way you'd like to help move our congregation toward beloved community. And I welcome Steve Sarakaku, Jean Durkin, and Martha Holman to share their thoughts with us about their experiences.
Good morning. So I made sacrifices to attend all 8 Beloved Conversation sessions because I believe that these conversations were critical to changing the culture of the church to one more welcoming and safe for people of color. Despite our best intentions, we members of UCE don't always do or say the right thing to people of color. I've been witness to that. While I rarely identify as a person of color, I am reminded from time to time that I am not white, that I'm different in some ways. During this program, it became clear to me that throughout my life, the differences have been there, subtle though they may have been. And I think that I felt the section on microaggressions more keenly than some of the other participants because I have been on the receiving end. Now, racially, my childhood was much different than most of the other participants. My schoolmates were more diverse racially and ethnically than most. And because I came from a non-white culture, coupled with the fact that my father grew up in Hawaii, a true melting pot, my family's attitude toward people of other races and ethnicities was very open and accepting. My mother experimented with food from other cultures. My father was in international sales, so I got to hear stories about and meet some people from other countries. And I had white classmates from Appalachia and the Deep South, a Puerto Rican, a Mexican, some from Eastern Europe, and one from Japan. And many of my classmates were Americans of Japanese ancestry, like me. Some of the children in my school came from parents who were the first in their families born in the US. So we were in the same boat, so to speak. And because my career over 30 years was with the Chicago Public Schools, I got to be in relation with many people of color as students, parents, and colleagues. It was through that wide range of experience that I learned what characteristics are attributable to race or socioeconomic status and which were not. But I also made the mistakes that so many well-meaning people here are afraid to make. Only I made them over a period of decades and learned from my mistakes and those of others. And, so I saw the confusion with which many of my fellow beloved conversations participants struggled and recognized that I had those same struggles. And I still make mistakes, but now I'm quicker to recognize them and make adjustments. And I believe that as we continue the work that was started by this program and the REAL team, that we will emerge with the kind of awareness that is needed to make us better accomplices in the fight to end white supremacy culture and to make a safer, more welcoming world for our siblings of color. This is an urgent need. People are suffering, even dying, because we as a society have not acted boldly enough or quickly enough. There is a lot of history that we have to overcome, but as the song goes, we shall overcome. We have taken the first steps, but the road is long, so we have to keep going together.
I was inspired by beloved conversations like we all were to research into our own family's history concerning race. My generation and my parents' and my grandparents' generations were all Caucasian and baptized Catholics. My 6 brothers and sisters married other Caucasians, except for my gay brother who became a Catholic priest. My parents were considered a mixed marriage, mixing their German and Irish heritages. And my partner Paula's Jewish background seemed really foreign to my parents. Our neighborhood in the south suburbs was all white, and kids were either Catholic or public. My high school, yeah, you know that. My high school class was less than 10% black when I was a freshman, but a few years after I graduated, it was almost all black. By the time my father died, the all-white suburb of Dalton had turned to almost all black. I found out by asking my older sister about our family's earlier experience with race that my father had just turned 1 year old in July of 1919. Outside his Bronzeville apartment, there was a race riot. From July 27th to August 3rd, 1919, thousands fought in the streets. On July 30th, 30 fires were started all before noon by white Irish immigrants in an area called the Black Belt. They placed cables across the streets to keep the fire trucks from the fires they had set. This was their effort to drive black people out of Chicago who were competing for jobs. Many black people did leave due to the violence and the stockyards refusing their return to work after the riots, locking them out of their livelihoods. My dad's father worked in the railroads. He was stuck at work during the week of riots, leaving his wife and 4 children alone in a very dangerous situation in a mixed neighborhood. My grandmother, she was about this tall, accepted a kindness from the next door neighbor, and she and her 4 little kids scooted across an ironing board from their 2nd or 3rd floor window across a gangway into the neighbor's window. He was a black man who knew that she was alone with children and that they needed milk and food to survive. They all knew that she or my grandfather could be killed if they were in the streets of their neighborhood. Violence that began with a white man stoning a black kid to death who was just trying to swim in Lake Michigan resulted in 23 black and 15 white Chicagoans dead and over 500 injured, with over 1,000 black Chicagoans homeless due to arson. When my dad turned 75 years old in 1995, he had lived about 38 years in our house in Dalton. He and my mom and 5 kids moved from Englewood out of a 2-bedroom flat, needing more room. They had 2 more kids, and more room ended up being not enough room, but we made do. He and my mom joined one of our parish priests and some of the parishioners in standing up to our racist neighbors in many ways, integrating the community pool, assisting in Head Start at Elk Gardens, public housing, and in community meetings with blacks and whites, trying to stand up to the redlining practices that profited from both white flight and the exploitive, shaky black mortgage home loan scams. But several decades later, white flight left my dad as one of the last whites on the block. A year before he died, he knocked on his neighbor's door asking for help. The neighbor who was black was happy to give my dad's car a well-needed jump so it could get going. The next day, my dad left a ham on his front porch as a thank you. The neighbor said, "Joe, you didn't have to give me a ham, it was only a jump." My sister told me that my dad said, "And you didn't have to give me that jump." When my dad died, I told the little neighbor girl that she could keep picking the roses off my dad's rose bush until somebody new moved in, that the roses should be enjoyed, that my dad would have wanted it. My dad's experiences really highlight for me the importance of connection, real connection between real people. Here at UCE, we often stumble as we try to get it right, thinking that if we white folks just welcome somebody who we see as different than us just exactly right, then boom, they'll want to be us. My dad knew that you just had to plant roses and share them to start the connections and then be authentic in asking and offering a helping hand. I think that Beloved Conversations is a path toward influencing our almost all-white congregation into shifting away from this attitude of wanting them to join us. We are called to form genuine connections with all who enter our doors.
When I finished my Beloved Conversations group, Part of what I had done toward the end of it was write a letter. We were all asked as part of the curriculum to do this, and the letter was to be written as if we were writing it to the whole congregation. And it was about whether or not what we had experienced in this Beloved Conversations group. And a part of that for me, as well as for others, was whether or not our own church followed Unitarian Universalist values when it came to racial equity. It was a difficult thing to write about because I had no specific tools for it, but it was kind of clear to me that some aspects of UCE as an institution worked well in this regard, and other aspects weren't so clear, other aspects of church life. What else I remember about that letter is that I, as well as others, thought that we should formalize some kind of an evaluation of UCE about where we are in terms of being truly welcoming to all. You know our song we sing, "Come, come, whoever you are." We love singing that song, and we mean it. And I wonder, do we truly practice our values in church operations, programming, financial dealings, and governance? Others agree that we should ask these difficult questions. Just this summer, the Social Justice Council of UCE, under the aegis of the Board of Trustees, has initiated a project to conduct an equity assessment, or an audit, of the congregation, including staff. The team appointed by the council to make this happen is currently looking at several vendors who do equity and inclusion training and consulting. We look forward to working with experts in the field who will help us do a fair and complete audit of our congregation's alignment with our values around these important topics of equity and inclusion. Our plan is to look at all types of equity, not just racial equity, but also gender equity, abilities equity, and more. The results will be shared with the board and with all of you. We assume the assessment will show some areas where we can improve, and we will address those once we have the report. We will also celebrate those areas where we are doing well already. But for now, try to look around with fresh eyes. Are we truly equitable in our church life? Odds are not fully, and odds are we can change that. My hope is that we are all open to the hard look and to working on whatever we may find to achieve an even higher level of equity in our own beloved community. Each person who walks in our door or with whom we partner could feel a real sense of belonging if we are truly following our own end statements, our values, and our UU principles. May we be so bold, so brave, and so loving.
Doing this work requires that we bring our whole selves, and that means all of the history that we carry with us. As I was reminded by my friend Julika, the way that we do racial and social justice is the same way that we do all other things. So if I'm a perfectionist in my life, I'm going to be a perfectionist in my racial and social justice work. If I'm defensive in my way of approaching the world, I'm going to bring that defensiveness to my racial and social justice work. We are not robots for justice. We are human and spiritual beings who carry within us all of our pain, all of our coping mechanisms and strategies, which we develop to survive whatever it is that we have needed to survive. Those strategies have worked in many ways, but they also really can hold us back. We can't move beyond them if we don't acknowledge them. So we remember and we name and we address the pain that we carry with us as we do the racial justice work, because that is the work. It's not an interruption or a diversion. At least it's a necessary part of the work, but it's not enough. It's not enough to address those patterns and strategies and coping mechanisms, those demons and messages that arise as we are confronted with difficulties. We must then look to how these patterns and ways of operating operate in our larger systems so that we can change those systems. To overcome oppressive patterns and dehumanization, we must dismantle white supremacy together through our deeper understanding of ourselves and each other. We must move beyond our fears towards our hopes of greater liberation for us all. Last week, Reverend Julie Taylor talked about how scary things are less scary when we deal with them together, and racial justice is no different. When we are engaged in the white supremacy of our culture, we are disconnected from one another, we dehumanize one another, and so to overcome these things, we need to reconnect with each other, reconnect with the divine, and build the beloved community. We need to recognize that humanity is in all of us, and we need to do what we can through creative, honest, and compassionate conversation to build that beloved community. I'd like to just invite anyone who's participated in the Beloved Conversations curriculum to raise your hand, please. And so if you look around, if you are interested in this, if this is something that seems promising to you, please talk to one of these individuals or me. We'll also have a sign up at the back table if you want to indicate that you're interested in learning more. We're going to have another set of these conversations beginning in the fall. May we continue to be brave, honest, and responsible in our search for truth and meaning. May we cultivate our hopes, acknowledge our fears, and commit ourselves to action that generates more joy, more love, and more liberation for all. May it be so.